Wow, so much happened at Build this week. And so what I've done in this video is I've broken down the top 10 things that happened, and I got James from Microsoft to join me to give you a firsthand explanation of what those are, right? So either you go watch hundreds of hours of Build content, or you can watch this 30 minutes. Now you're thinking, Shane, it's a little long. I get that. I could have cut out more of the stuff, but it was just James' goodness. Also, if it's like, hey, I don't really want to know about all the things, remember, you can look down in the description, and down there is timestamps. So you can jump from the 10 different key announcements. So if you just want to go check those out, and you'll see though that the two longest ones are at the end, the Microsoft Fabric stuff and the Copilot connectors that we're going to be able to do with the Power Platform. And that's where James and I really got really nerdy there for a while. So that's why they're longer and they're at the end, but the others are pretty quick hitters. So anyway, that's enough of the blah, blah, blah. Let's just jump in and take a look. Hi, James. How are you today?
How's it going, Shane?
Good. I'm probably not as overworked as you are. I know you've been hot on the presses getting all this Microsoft build out, but could you take a minute just to tell these folks who you are? I know I've known you forever, but they probably don't.
My name is James Lenick, and I run the data platform team for the Power Platform. So my team drives the vision for Dataverse, AI Builder, and the Power Platform connector ecosystem. So really the platform underpinnings of Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform product.
Now, that's pretty foundational, right? And just so everyone knows, like you kind of, when we first met, you owned basically the admin experiences. So I would say you're a pretty well-versed guy when it comes to this Power Platform thing.
That's right. I started off as just that admin guy back when we actually had originally multiple admin centers. There was a Power Apps admin center and a Power Automate admin center back in the day.
Oh, I remember. All right. Well, so we've had all these great announcements with Build, and you and I have got to get through a lot of them here. So let's just hop in. And I guess the first one is, we've got all these new Copilots, right? There's a Power Pages Copilot, there's a Power BI Copilot, there's a Power Automate Copilot. We already had a Power Apps Copilot. Like, what is up with Copilot everything?
Copilots galore, right? And it's all about AI assisting you in making your existing actions even easier. So some of the really cool things around, let's take the Power Pages Copilot. It's really around assisted copy editing, using natural language to generate text, generate page layouts, generate images and themes that are just a part of that low code website solution. Like I'm a little partial to the fact that you can even describe what you want in terms of a form that you want to include on your low-code website, and that actually creates the underlying data structure in Dataverse, in addition to the data-driven form experience to collect that information as a part of the low-code website. And also as a part of the Power Pages is the ability to kind of have kind of inception, if you will, within your website, because you can add a PVA chatbot that uses generative AI within a website that you've created using generative AI. So it's that layering and really the cohesiveness of the Power Platform that is even really being put together with generative AI in really, really cool, compelling ways.
Yeah, and this idea that Power Pages and Power BI are gotten it, right? It's really a win for me because I don't know if you know, but I've been kind of lazy and I've never really learned how to do either of those products. And now that I can just use words, maybe Shane will finally be able to build a Power BI report. I'm not promising anything.
It's right. Shane only has to be smart enough to know the questions he doesn't know answers to. You've just been waiting for Copilot your whole life.
See, you know me too well, right? So Power Automate, same thing, right? They kind of took that whole design it and build it methodology, and they moved it 7 steps forward. I think the big excitement with that one, though, is that they're finally going to change Flow Cloud Studio. It looks so much prettier. It might actually be usable now. Like, I am super excited to play with that one.
The new designer for Cloud Flows is no longer just the preview option. It's here, and it's here to stay with all of the Copilot experience. And if you haven't tried it out, that essentially just describing as you build your workflow, it honestly knocks my socks off every time I use it. So you really should check it out. It's really compelling in terms of lowering the friction and kind of going with the new modern experience. And plug there too is the generative GPT actions for AI Builder that are also kind of a part of that. So again, it's that layering of generative AI, which is you get this brand new designer for building your business workflow. It not only understands your natural language to help you build essentially the process you want, but you can include generative actions within that. Essentially, these are the same models that you would use with Azure OpenAI, just brought to you by AI Builder. And now you can leverage that even within the workflow that you're building in a Copilot assisted way. So it's really cool stuff. Everyone should take 10 minutes and try it out.
Oh, well, yeah, and there I'll put a link up there. My buddy Daniel Christian put a video today that walks you through how to build it. That's got a side-by-side comparison.
Yeah.
Great stuff. And so you already kind of mentioned, Power Virtual Agents being in the mix here.
Mhm.
And so this is one of the ones that when I saw, like, it melted my brain, because we've always had chatbots, you can create topics and do that. But now with the enhancement of Copilot, now I can just be like, hey, magically build me a chatbot based on my company data. And then let's just go host it on our public website. And in 5 minutes, I'm out, right? Like I don't have to go build all the individual topics. I don't have to train a bunch of stuff and just kind of say, hey, Copilot, answer questions using that. That is revolutionary for lazy people like me.
Well, and it also and that's the I think the revolutionary thing around these type of models is that it used to be for building a chatbot that you had to know all of the questions that the person was going to go ask.
Yeah.
And like building those skills, that skills library and maintaining it is a pain. And what's really cool with Power Virtual Agents is you can point it to your business data now. So not only, yes, there is essentially the conversation booster, pointing it to, where your knowledge base is, like say in external documentation, but now they have kind of the generative actions engine. So you can point it to an API, a Power Platform connector. So something you're already using maybe as a part of your Power Platform solution to kind of activate your enterprise data. You can also point that Power Virtual Agent bot at that as well. And it's smart enough to essentially build the skills for you. And not only that, like if you do have to go build specific skills, again, that natural language, you can just tell it the skill you want to build. Same kind of concept as a Power Automate workflow, just bringing that concept to chat and it'll generate it for you. So it's essentially getting to the time to bot is so much lower now, right? And the richness and the ability of it to answer questions over your business data is just so much better than it was before. And it's really cool. And again, earlier, like you can use these things in conjunction, right? You can build these bots that are in your Power Apps, are in your Power Pages. The layering, I think it's like a multiplier effect for people that build on the Power Platform. And it's going to help people do way more with way less, for sure.
Yeah, when I'm looking forward. I haven't got my hands on the limited preview yet around the whole call, like so it can call APIs and such, right? So you can the
That's right.
chat will be able to even go that much further. And I think we've got some really cool stuff about calling APIs and connectors a little bit later in this chat, but that's pretty cool.
I'm really excited about it.
So then, one of the other things is you told me that so Copilot and Power Apps will be able to work over, larger data sets, right? Your baby Dataverse. And so model-driven apps having Copilot capabilities. Like what's that? Is it just more of the same, just more awesomeness, but in model-driven apps, or is there something else there?
Well, so it's not just model-driven apps. There's also the ability to drop a Copilot control in any modern application. So drop it right onto the canvas, right? And today, we've had some, limited previews of this capability, and where you could tie essentially that control, right, and that experience to a set of Dataverse tables, right? And what that's allowed people to do is you can build applications where people can ask questions around the data that the app is supporting. And up until now, that was somewhat limited. So it was only operating over a certain view of that data, essentially like the top record. So, say you want to activate data sources, you have Dataverse tables that have millions of records in it, like we have today. Well, it's not going to be able to answer questions against the full set of that data. So if I have millions of opportunities, millions of cases, millions of emails, and I ask questions around how many this, how many that, how many in this city, in that city, in this type of cohort. Now we're adding the ability for Power Apps to be able to answer that questions, because effectively what we're doing behind the scenes is we're taking that natural language question and we're translating it to an actual query against the Dataverse APIs, right? And there's a couple great things part of that, which is number one, that's very performant because that's the same API layer that supports, high scale queries and filters and views and searches today in model-driven apps and Canvas apps. But also it all honors the same permissions that are already a part of that application. So it's not like we're escalating privilege as a part of this, but we're bringing essentially that existing data model, that existing business process that you built an app around, and we're now allowing you to essentially ask deeper and deeper questions in the context of the app within this Copilot chat conversational experience, and it can answer them right there.
And so did I hear you right? Because today the one I've played with, it can only talk to one table at a time. So this one will actually be able to talk to multiple data as it goes.
Multiple tables, custom tables. That's right.
Crazy.
Yeah.
All right. So an easy one. I don't think either of us have a lot of excitement for this one, but we'll mention it anyway. So Power Automate desktop flows, it has all those rich actions over there that help lazy people like me. And it sounds like now we're going to get an SDK, so smarter people than me, or maybe me with a chat GPT answering the questions. I don't know. But, people will be able to build their own additions over there, their own custom actions. So it seemed like a pretty clear-cut win there, but nothing too exciting for us.
Well, I would probably consider myself in that cohort too, but I would say that, this is a pretty cool thing with like a new way for developers to build custom actions for desktop flows with the action SDK that's in public preview. And, it's a way for developers that are leveraging and companies that are leveraging RPA at scale to essentially extend the library of out-of-box actions that we already have available for desktop flows. And now it's just easier to have reusable actions that interact with their most commonly used homegrown apps. So I think it's a big improvement. I think it will help some of the reusability and productivity of developers around our current RPA solutions today, for sure.
All right, and so then we've got increased productivity for developers with the Power Platform. Like that's like a broad statement of, hey, we got a lot of new cool stuff. And for me, the big new cool stuff was the new homepage, right? So the new homepage, it's beautiful, it's more interactive, it's more targeted, it's easier to use, right? And I did a whole video on that on Monday, so we don't have to really drive into those. They want to do it, they can click up there somewhere to check that, or I guess it's over there. I don't know, somewhere on the screen. There you go. But then there were some other pieces for the increased productivity. So some new stuff around managed environments, which I'm guessing you're a big fan of since you kind of came from that world. What's going on there with those catalogs and all that?
Yeah, and so like I think it's just part of the continued push for us to add more capabilities for companies that are going big on the Power Platform. How do we give more and more capabilities to allow those types of companies to operate at scale, right? Across, hundreds and thousands of people building, right? And so one of the things that was announced, just this week was essentially managed environments now have the ability to have a catalog of enterprise approved templates and components, because there's inevitable duplication, right, within an enterprise if you have a lot of people all building similar things that need to connect to similar types of data sources. They need to build similar types of workflows that need to look and feel the same and be on brand. And so this is, I think, the first example where you have professional developers can publish artifacts such as apps and flows and bots for their organization to use using essentially the pack command line tool and GitHub Actions to essentially a catalog that's hosted within a managed environment for that organization. And then, that can facilitate reuse across, a fleet of citizen developers within an organization. So it's really cool.
Yeah, managed environments just keep getting better. I guess at some point I'm going to have to make a video on those, but I haven't gotten there yet. Shh.
Comment down below if you want to hear a managed environment post or video from Shane.
James is a professional YouTuber. He knows. So speaking of professional YouTubing, I just did a video on this today, but everyone can go check that one out up there somewhere as well. And this is Julie's new feature around Excel import to create a full working app. So if you got an Excel spreadsheet, everyone has Excel spreadsheets. You drag that over into the new Power Apps interface. You drop it. Copilot analyzes all your data. It makes a bunch of suggestions, and then you just press Create App, and it will create the Dataverse table for you, all the columns, import all your data, and then make a fully working responsive app. This feature is just so powerful for enabling that first maker to build their first app and get out and go. So excited for this feature. I love it.
Couldn't have said it better.
There you go.
No more excuses to use Excel as a database anymore. We've made it so easy to pull it into a native data platform. So love it.
That is why one of my most popular videos is Excel is a terrible data source. People are a big fan of that. So then here's another one of your favorite children, I think, and you've tried to explain this one to me a couple of times. So I'm not going to try to do it much. You jump in and explain it to them. But this whole idea around creating custom plugins in Dataverse for Power Apps, I explain this to me like I'm a 2-year-old.
A 2-year-old. So sorry. I was gearing up for a 5-year-old, but I'll have to think about it. So if you want 5 people to all do the same thing, right? And they all have to 5 do it themselves, right? That's duplicative. Wouldn't you rather have one person say on the server, say they're 10 feet away, tell them to go do it, right? And then all of the 5 people over here don't have to worry about it. And you could say, hey, James, like that idea of delegating business logic to the server versus doing it all on the client, isn't that what Flow does, right? And
Yeah,
the
that's exactly what I
answer
thought
is
when I saw these.
yes. And so with what we have with PowerFX plugins, right? It's yes and these are synchronous business logic, right? Whereas Power Automate workflows are about automating a business process that runs asynchronously that can have multiple steps, right? But what we have today is really we're building on essentially the notion of what we have a plugin today in Dataverse. So this is the ability to essentially have .NET code that runs custom logic that you can either call through a custom API, right, on Dataverse, or you can trigger based off of a record being added, updated, deleted within the platform. So this ability to essentially run custom logic synchronously, right, as a transaction, either standalone or when some kind of record or operation happens within Dataverse already exists today. But what we've done is we've said, you know what, you now don't need to go use .NET to go write that. You can use the PowerFX language that you already use today across Power Apps that's now available in PVA, et cetera. Like you can use that Excel-like language, right, to author business logic that runs on the server. And so there's a bunch of customers today that fall back to using Azure Functions, for example, to run custom code in the context of their business process or within the context of Canvas apps. And you don't really have that need anymore. You can leverage the native Dataverse platform to build essentially that custom synchronous logic. And we're also going to be adding the ability to make a same reason why you might make a sequence of calls within your Canvas app. I don't know if anyone out there has about 100 PowerFX calls that run on start when you're loading the app, and you know who you are, right? Well, guess what? Like you can have essentially a batch of those types of functions effectively could run server side. And yes, it could, we're even adding the ability to make calls to connectors as a part of that. It's not just essentially business logic that runs within Dataverse. And so these are a way of having a composable business logic, right? That's fully native, fully solution aware, honors all your ALM processes, and you can easily reuse it across your apps and flows and pages and bots within the Power Platform.
And so you told me like this can do things like run SQL stored procedures for me on top of just running that code. So it's not just a way to interact with Dataverse. It, like you said it, but I want to kind of make it more obvious. Like it can talk to the connectors, and so we can do all the things in the fullness of time.
That's right. So we have 1,000 Power Platform connectors today, and we're enabling the very first one we're enabling to essentially call through a function is the execute stored proc, I think V2 action on the SQL connector. And it's like the first action of a connector we're going to be enabling through this runtime, but it's going to be the first of really many and all of them in the fullness of time.
Can't wait to see that. Yeah. I promise I have a video in the works on that one. I just not smart enough to get there yet. So we'll get there. So speaking of me not being smart enough, like we're in the hard section of this interview. So you also talked about Hyperscale, and all of a sudden we can build Dataverse tables with elastic backends or something of that nature. Like what is an elastic table? Why do I care?
Yeah. Well, and I think this speaks to the scale of the platform and the scale of Dataverse, because Dataverse, it can take your Excel file that maybe it has millions of rows, right? For example, and it can take that and pull it into our relational tables today, and you can build awesome, applications on top of that. But with elastic tables aren't worried about data that's millions of rows. Elastic tables are around unlocking use cases that have hundreds of millions of rows of data. So take an example where, there's like a customer, they're looking to increase sales. They have a ton of event and information coming in around what people are buying. So you're talking about maybe hundreds of millions of events and records that are coming in, right? And maybe it's from web locations where there's JSON, more flexible schemas, right? And that is the scenario for elastic tables. So you are able to import and store and analyze large volumes and it's more non-relational data. So that's a little different from what we have with more relational data models with Dataverse today, but it's about non-relational data at scale. So it's about tens and hundreds of millions of records, right? With flexible schemas. So there's a JSON column type that we're adding to these, right? And they can scale, like they can scale to these large volumes of record sizes, right? And they have the idea of having a TTL for these records, so the automated removal of data after a time period. So there's a bunch of these types of scenarios, especially if you think about like leveraging more and more of like, hey, web-based telemetry that's high scale, that could be a piece of your data model, a piece of your business process, right? And it really speaks to the idea that, depending on your business process, like Dataverse is committed to having a table type for you, right? Be it relational, to be able to virtualize external data, or now, essentially scale elastically to very, very high volumes.
Wow. Yeah. So once again, and I think it's always been one of my favorite things about using Dataverse is basically, this sounds wrong, but right, the performance is your problem, right? James and his team have to deal with it working, right? They just give me options to put my data in. As long as I put my data in correctly, they will make sure that all the indexes and magic that makes databases fast happen. And I can just worry about my business processes and my business logic. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. And the good news is that we honestly have much smarter people than myself that know how to run like Azure SQL and Cosmos DB and these types of relational and non-relational databases at massive scale and highly tune these systems. And so we're bringing some of this expertise in a fully managed way for all of you, so that you don't have to like know that, you don't have to like learn that expertise. You just want to build an application over your business data. And that's like the promise of Dataverse, that activation, easy activation to solve a problem quickly.
Well, and then that rolls us into the very next feature, really, right? So now also as part of Build, you guys announced Microsoft Fabric. And I think the whole idea of Fabric is that, get all this data into one happy fabric, if you will. And so then now you can take advantage of some of those different Azure functionalities, Power BI, all this, and really not have to think so hard about, hey, how is all this happening? It's just all in one plane and I can kind of build it. Is that accurate kind of first pass at what this Microsoft Fabric is?
Yeah. And I think that at its core comes, I think, this one principle that hopefully resonates with your viewers, in the fact that like when you talk about enterprise applications and processes, I don't think any end-to-end solution is complete without operational reporting, right?
Yeah.
For maybe the project managers, or analytics or reporting for the executives or the managers of a business process. And so like inherently, if you're solving these types of problems, you have to be able to track and monitor that business process. And this is not, I think it's not news to anyone of the Power Platform. I mean, this is, for example, part of the reason why, if you build on Dataverse, like we have first-class integrations with Power Query. We have a Power Query connector. We have rich Dataverse integrations with Power BI, because you want to get your data into some of the best BI tools in the world, Power BI, right? We have Azure Synapse Link to essentially replicate the data in the platform into Azure Synapse Link, which, if you're not familiar, it's the ability to, essentially, it's a analytics tool set that can operate over data lakes that you've created within, say, ADLS Gen 2 technology within your organization. And really, it's all about like, organizations want to make better decisions on their business data. This is highly valuable data, right? And that's really what Fabric's about, which is the fact that it's about solving that type of problem. And what was announced, and the difference is, it used to be the case that with Azure Synapse and these powerful analytic tools like real-time analytics, data warehousing, data science, they all required essentially an Azure subscription to go set up, right? And so what's happening with Microsoft Fabric, it's bringing this lake-centric SaaS solution. So it's like all of that benefit of the Power Platform and Power BI now to these new types of analytical technologies with you used to need an Azure subscription around. So it makes that business data more easily and accessible, right? We were talking earlier around, hey, the beauty of not having to manage all that infra yourself. Well, this is now the case for you building all of that, those data insights and analytics for your business data, right? And so that's kind of what Fabric is. Did that help answer your question?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, right. What I'm hearing, is if you got lots of data, right? Large scale organization, you got all these places it lives today. You're still struggling, right? So we get it all in a fabric. Now it's all just one happy data, no matter where it really came from.
That's right.
And so now reporting and analytics on it is, press a button. I don't want to oversimplify, but it's almost like that, right? Press a button and it's like, hey, here's your default Power BI report for all this data that you just ingested. Now modify as you see fit.
Yeah, and exactly. It's like you kind of bring it into kind of what they call the one lake, right? And because it's this kind of rich compute and SaaS layer, that unlocks things like what they announced just this week too, with like Power BI Copilot, right? So users can quickly create and tailor reports. They can transform data. They can generate DAX, which is like, the alien language of Power BI. They can create summaries. They can explore their data with far less friction than would have been previously required if you need to go ask IT for an Azure subscription, go do a data integration project, go pull it all in. It's really just lowering the barrier, right, to make your business data more discoverable and accessible. This is kind of what Power BI Desktop championed, but it's just really advancing that to the next level with more scale and more business data. So it's really, really compelling.
All right. So quick question here. Like, why do I care about all of that as a Power Platform guy? Like, I didn't hear a lot of words that I really use.
Well, so I think the thing is that if you're using Dataverse, right, to help model your application or your business process, if you're storing your business data within here, what we're actually going to be launching with Fabric is essentially an evolution of Azure Synapse Link. So Azure Synapse Link today replicates your data to an ADLS account so that you can do essentially your analytics workflows on top of that in Azure Synapse. And with Fabric, now what we're going to do is we are creating essentially an evolution of Azure Synapse Link within the Fabric One Lake ecosystem. So if you're checking out Fabric, right, and that SaaS experience to explore, transform, and build new analytics and Power BI reports on your data, now Dataverse data is just there, and we're not replicating it. We're essentially building kind of a shortcut to the data that honors like the privileges over here. So essentially it's going to be limited to admins initially, but essentially it's made available to build Power BI reports in a highly performant way through what they call their lakehouse architecture, right? With one click, right? And essentially what that's going to bring is, like, if you're familiar with Power BI today, it kind of has direct query mode and it has import mode, right?
Yeah.
And direct query mode is great because you don't have to do a data integration project, but the performance at runtime is not as good. Whereas import mode requires you to essentially go and import and build that data model or that data set with, or build essentially a data set within PowerBI.com. And then your Power BI report performance is so much better on top of that. And with essentially this lakehouse approach with Fabric, you get both in one. So you don't have to copy the data over and transform it, but you get that high performance that you would expect if that data was imported into an actual Power BI data set. And that's not just all. So like, not only can Dataverse data just be there in Fabric for you to like build your new analytics, but say you are leveraging the One Lake to kind of register your data sources and kind of build views of your common data model that you want to reuse. With Dataverse, you'll be able to have the ability to create virtual tables through the SQL endpoint that you can create in the Lakehouse to make apps and flows on top of that. And I know this is a common scenario. I talk with customers all the time. They have a lake, their data lake is part of their cloud data strategy, and they're using that to create the common views and structures of their data models and their data shapes. And they want to activate that through applications. And so you'll get both of that with some of the new kind of Fabric integration for Dataverse coming out.
So what I heard, right, because once again, we know I'm not very smart, is, kind of the same way that we love to build a Canvas app on top of Dataverse because they just work together, right? There's no middleman, there's no extra plumbing in between. It sounds like when I have my Dataverse data in the Fabric, it's kind of the same thing, right? Like when I use Power BI or whatever to integrate there, like they just work together, and I'm not having to go through all these mechanisms, all these middlemen to kind of get through the data.
We're bringing, I think, the Power BI and Power Apps worlds ever closer together.
Gotcha. So last but not least, like when you and I had our preview chat or whatever about like what we were going to talk about today, like this was the one that got me the most excited, which is weird because it's maybe a little bit the furthest one away. But so one of the things that was announced today was this whole idea of, Microsoft 365 Copilot for my whole org, right?
Mhm.
So this magic, I use the word magical, I shouldn't, but this Copilot, this large language model that sits over all of our data. So which makes total sense. I'm excited about that. But then you told me that you're going to have these new, I don't want to know, connectors, plugins, whatever, where I'm going to go to that Copilot and be able to say something like, hey, I just did blah, blah, blah. And it will just know to go and like record that into my Power App. Like it's all going to be connected, and I'll just talk to the robot and won't even have to use apps anymore. Like I'm probably way ahead of myself, but what is this thing?
No, I mean, I think when you think of M365 Copilot, you should think ChatGPT for my work, right?
Yep.
It's your Copilot coworker. It's going to be directly there within your productivity services of M365, and it's going to be able to answer questions, summarize all of the data you have in Office today, your documents, your emails, your calendar, your contacts, your chats, etc. And so it's going to be really intertwined within your productivity fabric. What we announced today, right? And actually it was a part of Rajesh's keynote, like the second part of Build, was the idea of it's not just going to be essentially your Office data, your Office documents. Your business data is going to be there too. So for example, if you're leveraging Dynamics or you're building Power Platform solutions that have your data within Dataverse, M365 Copilot is going to be able to be grounded to be able to answer questions against that data. So you can ask it, how many opportunities do I have active at this moment? How many cases are my team working on? How many field workers do I have out on the job right now? And if that data is modeled within the platform, right, and that's enabled within that Copilot experience, it's going to be able to answer those questions, right? And so it's really just like we're just blurring the lines around essentially where and how you interact with your business data. And this is super critical because if you have users of your applications that are also using M365 apps, using Teams, using Outlook in the fullness of time, that data is just ever closer to their fingertips, right? Increasing their productivity, helping them do more quickly, right? Within their existing surface area.
But in the vision, right? So you described that as to the point of where I'm able to, ask questions about my data, interact, analyze the data. But the ultimate landing point is right this idea that I can then have it take action through words on my data. Or am I over imagining the end goal?
No, that's right. I think one part of it is like, hey, it can search over your knowledge base, and that knowledge base includes your business data. But it's also, I think what you called out, there's extensibility for it to also take action, right? And this is what you heard talked about today, which was this idea that there's plugins for M365 Copilots. And so there's different ways of essentially adding customization to that experience. You can do Teams message extensions, essentially the way of building custom apps in Teams. M365 has a way of bringing ChatGPT plugins. And guess what? Power Platform connectors and the ability to plug in your custom connectors, your custom workflows, your custom plugins, that's also going to be coming to the early access program too. So now it's not just about, hey, searching my data. It's, hey, create this task for me, start this approval for me, take this action contextually. And it's really kind of bringing that kind of plugin, ChatGPT plugin value prop, that same kind of extensibility right to your M365 surface area.
That's the stuff that gets me worked up, right? I mean, this idea that me, right, the low code, no code developer, have never written a line of C# in my life. Some point in the future, I am going to write one of your fancy little plugins and connect it into our Copilot for Microsoft 365 and just be like, yeah, my words made my work go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't even have to be that hard because we have 1,000 Power Platform connectors today that in aggregate have over, I think it's like 5,000 or 6,000 individual actions by themselves, that even those are relevant to enable there, just like the raw actions of our connectors. And then, as you said, just like having low code way of building custom plugins and extensions, we're just going to lower the bar for essentially every information worker to improve their own productivity, right? Using the same apps that they already use as a part of their day-to-day.
Oh my goodness. I love it so much. All right. Well, James, I completely love you so much for this. I appreciate you taking the time to walk me through this, explain things that I wasn't capable of explaining. Really appreciate it. Kudos to you and the team. This is some really exciting stuff.
Thanks for having me. We're can't wait for Power Platform Conference later this year too, and maybe seeing you and some of your viewers too. And can't wait to hear about all the feedback that people have from trying out some of the stuff that we announced just this week.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I guess everyone, I'm just going to say with that, thanks and have a great day.